Okay, so let's start with F here. Well, now let me get sorted here. So the first thing you would do if you're solving something like F is, and this goes for every question, is factor. The first thing you want to look at is to see if you can factor it before you can do anything else. So I look at F and I notice I can take an X out of both sides. Oh, and the other thing about F is I want to move the 7x over to the other side to make sure that this equals 0. So first I'm going to say 3x squared minus 7x equals 0. Then I'm going to factor out an x, so I get x outside of 3x minus 7 equals 0. And now I'm going to split this equation into two parts and let each side equal 0. So x equals 0, that's nice and easy. And then I get 3x minus 7 equals 0. And I'm going to have to solve this, and this would be x is equal to negative 7 over 3. So for this type of quadratic, we move the 7x over.
Positive. Positive.
Oh, positive. Yes. Thank you. Because it's negative here, so when I move him over, he becomes positive. Yes, thank you. So yeah, for this one, we move the 7x over, and we factor this equation, and that's it. All right, what about H? Something like question H. Okay, well, we're going to do the same thing for question H. The only difference is, or not difference, but the only thing we need to do extra is we need to kind of expand on this. We need to multiply the y out first. So what I mean is, first I'm going to multiply this y out. What you need to do with these equations is kind of like, I mentioned this yesterday, like take them apart and put them back together again. It's kind of confusing, but we're going to multiply the y out. We're going to move everything over to the left side, and then we're going to see what we can do from there. So this would be negative 9 equals y squared plus 6y. Now, I guess the easiest thing to do is, instead of moving everything else over, is to just move the 9 over. So when I move the 9 over, I get 0 equals y squared plus 6y plus 9. It doesn't matter if the 0 is on the left or the right. I mean, it's still the same thing. So we're going to factor this quadratic here. So I'm looking for a number that multiplies to give me 9 and adds to give me 6. This could be pretty easy. I think this is what we would call a perfect square quadratic. The numbers are 3 and 3. So when I factor this, I'm going to rewrite this, guys. I'm going to write this as y squared plus 6y plus 9 equals 0. I like to have the 0 on the right. This would be y plus 3, and y plus 3 equals 0. And you set each side equal to 0. So in this case, y plus 3 equals 0. Y plus 3 equals 0. Y is negative 3. Oops. All right. And one more. Well, I mentioned to you guys yesterday to try J as well. So let's look at one more. Well, we'll look at a lot more, actually. I just meant I'm going to show you J. And then what I'm probably going to do is ask you guys to maybe try a couple. I know it's early. And then there's one or two topics I want to do today. I'd like to do completing the square, but anyways, we'll see. Or sorry, I know I'll do that, but we'll see how far we get with that. So J, W times 6W times 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that out. So I get 6W squared plus W equals 2. I'll move the 2 over. 6W squared plus W minus 2 equals 0. And then I'll look for a number. Okay, so this one's a little bit more complicated. I'm looking for a number that's going to multiply to give me 12 and add to give me 1. Okay, so I need to think of multiples of 12. So there's, there's a conversation going on here. Let me close this. There is multiples of 12. So there's 3 and 4. That looks good. There's 2 and 6. There's 1 and 12. I think 3 and 4 would be the answer. And here it would be 4 and negative 3. So I split my middle number here. 6W squared, I'm going to say minus 3W plus 4W minus a 2. Now, I'm going to factor these two guys. So I'm going to remove a 3. So I get 2W squared minus W plus 2. Oh, hold on. Yeah, that's right. So 2W minus, this should be 3W, not 3. I knew I made a mistake there. 3W, I can remove. I'll fix my mistake. So 2W minus 1. And there we go. So from this one up top here, guys, I made a mistake. Instead of factoring 3, I'm going to take away a 3W. And that leaves me with a 2W minus 1. So I get 3W plus 2. A 2W minus 1 equals 0. And now what I'm going to do is set each equal to 0. And solve. So W here would be negative 2 over 3. And W here would be 1 over 2. Whew. So that's it. That was that actually. Question J was probably one of the hardest ones, or, like the hardest types you would see. Okay. So I know it's early, it's 8:18, but I would love for you guys to try one. Actually, P would be a good one to try for a challenge. So, okay, why don't you guys try number P, or letter P. And then we will move into the next section, completing the square. So I'll put myself on mute. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to try letter P, and then we'll check your answers. Remember, get rid of the fraction. You want to put it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that's the 2 hints I'll give you. Get rid of this fraction and put it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And I'll be back in 1 minute. Well, let's say 3 minutes, 4 minutes to check your answers. Okay, so I gave you lots of time. I got a couple. Oh, I think I got answers. Let me check the chat here. Ooh, yeah, Dustin and Fatima gave me both answers, and they're the same. So let's check them out. Okay, so first things first. Let me get rid of my writing here. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, first things first, we need to get rid of the fractions. We don't want to deal with fractions. So I need to find the lowest common denominator, or lowest common multiple, same thing, of 4 and 8. Okay, the LCD for this will be 8. Now, how do I know that it's 8? Just a little review for you guys. 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, dot, dot, dot. I can keep going. And then we have 8, we have 16, 24. The lowest common multiple here, or lowest common denominator here, will be 8. So that's where I get the 8. So I'm going to multiply everything by 8. So let's write that down. Okay, I was going to use a different color, but I don't think I will. So 8 times x squared over 4 plus 14x over 8 times 8. Oops. Sorry, guys, just making my writing a little better here. Maybe it's not. And then negative 3 times 8. Okay, so what I end up getting is the 8 and the 4 reduce to give me 2x squared plus 14x equals negative 24. Now, what I mentioned to you guys earlier is you want to put this in the form of ax squared plus 14x plus c, sorry, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I'll move the 24 over. To x squared plus 14x plus 24 equals 0. Now, before I even do this, I notice I can reduce everything here, or I can remove a 2 from everything here. So 2x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. And then I can remove the 2, or divide both sides by 2. So finally, x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. All right, now I need to think of two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 12 and add to give me 7. So as the commenters in the, or the Dustin and Fatima said in the chat, that's 3 and 4. So this factored becomes x plus 3, x plus 4 equals 0. And then I set both sides equal to 0. And finally, after all that work, x is going to be negative 3 and x is going to be negative 4. Perfect. So good job, Dustin and Fatima, and anybody else who gave this a try. That, the pretty tough question. Let me zoom out there so you can see the whole thing. A lot of work, a lot of factoring, but yeah, not too bad. All right. So let's move on to something new. Method number 2. So there's 3 methods. There's factoring, completing the square, and then there's factoring using the quadratic formula. I think some of you guys might like the quadratic formula when we get to this. So let's look at method number 2. Completing the square. The zero product rule. So let me zoom in here. The zero product rule can only be used if the equation is factorable, meaning, if I can factor this equation. So we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations, factorable and also non-factorable, meaning if we can't factor it, we're going to make it so we can factor it. We're going to do some work here to figure out how we can factor these equations. So the first property of completing the square, or the first thing we're going to look at, is this concept of the square root property. So you can see the square root property here for any real number. So a real number, not an imaginary number, but real number. If x squared equals k, then x will equal the square root of k, or negative square root of k. So what does that mean? Or how can I explain that in simple words? Well, think of the number 9. Okay, so the square root of 9. Let's think of 9, and then first let's write it as 3 squared. Well, the square root of 9, the answers for this could be 3. You can do this on your calculator. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. But there is another answer here that your calculator won't give you. It could be negative 3. And why is that? Well, 3 times 3, or negative 3 times negative 3, are all going to equal 9. So there's two possible answers when you're looking at the square root of a number. There's two possible answers. There's the positive answer and then the negative answer. So again, the square root of 9 could be 3 times 3, or negative 3 times negative 3. So let's look at this to solve the equations below. Question number 1 says, use the square root property to solve all of the equations. A is x squared equals 81. B, 3x squared plus 75 equals 0. And then C, x plus 3 all squared equals 20. Okay, so the first one is kind of what I just said. So x squared equals 81. So my answer can be plus or minus whatever the square root of 81 is. Now, guys, what's happening here is when I take my x squared and my 81, what I'm actually doing is taking the square root of both sides. So if you're wondering what happens to the x squared, where does it go? The square root of x squared is just x, and then this will leave us with plus or minus 9. You can do this on your calculator, not the plus or minus part, but if on your calculator you enter the square root of 81, you will get plus or minus 9. So my solutions for A are plus and minus 9. B is a little bit more complicated. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the equation to fit this form of my perfect square. X squared equals k. I don't know why they pick k for the square root property. It's just like a variable. It could be like a, b, c. But k is the number they choose. So I'm going to move the 75 over, which gives me the negative 75. Then I'm going to move the 3 over, meaning I'm going to divide both sides by 3. That's where I get the next part. X squared equals negative 25. Now, if you try this on your calculator, if you try to take the square root of negative 25 on your calculator, it will give you an error. So we're not actually looking to take the square root of the negative. Or like on the calculator, it's going to give you a mistake. When you take the square root of a negative number, you get what's called an imaginary number, or I, and your calculator will not do this for you. Your calculator will give you an error. It will say, well, actually, let me just try this. On the Casio, it says, so if you take the square root of a negative, yeah, it says math error, and then it says cancel or go to your question to fix it. So you can't really do the negative on your calculator, but you can take the square root of a 25 on your calculator. The square root of 25 on your calculator will say 5. Now, because it has a negative in there, we need to add the I. So if you're wondering where the 5i comes from, it's because the square root of a negative number is I. The square root of negative 1 is I. So the square root of negative 25 is 5i, and this represents an imaginary number. All right, we'll do some practice on this, don't worry.
So can I remove the minus and put 25? Then I will put I.
Yes, exactly. So so what you just said is right. Like if you were doing this on your calculator, don't put the negative in there. Just do the square root of 25, which will give you 5, and then you put the I in there. And the I is there because we have a negative. Yeah, that's good. All right, and again, we're going to practice this in a second. So let's look at question C. W plus 3 squared equals 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of both of these sides. I'm trying to get rid of the square, and that's what the square root does. So you'll see here in this step, I do not have a square anymore. I have W plus 3 equals plus or minus 20. Oh, this is a tough one. Oh, let me see if the calculator will do this one for you. I hope it does. Yes, nice. Okay, so guys, this right here, this working right here that I'm circling, how does this happen? Where did the square root of 20, how did that turn into 2 root 5? You can do this on your calculator. Oops. If you enter the square root of 20, you will get 2 root 5 on your calculator. I'm not going to spend too much time on where that comes from because your calculator will do it for you. The idea is you break it down into factors and you can remove a 4, 2 squared, but I won't get into that because your calculator does that for you. So hold on now, I'll put that back up there. Just let me get rid of my circles. So sorry. So if you do this on your calculator, square root of 20, it will literally tell you 2 root 5. I just tried this and it does work. Now, this is if you have the Casio calculator that they sell at the bookstore. If you're using your cell phone or something like that, you won't get the same answer. So definitely purchase a Casio calculator if you can. I was at Fnac in Laguna Mall the other day and they have them there. So I assume they're still at Carrefour and Lulu. All right, anyways, so I take the square root of both sides, which leaves me with W plus 3 equals plus or minus, right? This could be positive root 20 times root 20 or negative root 20 times negative root 20. And then I solve square root of 20. and I get 2 root 5. So the only thing left to do is to move this 3 over. Now, with this 3, if I was solving this, you could write it like this. Oops. Right, that's fine. That's a 5 there. But the book puts the 3 first, which is kind of how most math kind of people would write it. So this is fine if you want to do it like this, plus or minus 2 root 5 minus a 3. But the book says negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 5. That's fine, whatever you want to write. So let's practice this. Let's do some together. Okay. Trying to think of ones I can do and ones you can do. So let me try A and C. Okay, let me zoom out. Excuse me. I'll try A, C, and E. And then you guys can try B, D, and F. So, okay, I'll zoom in for myself. A is very easy. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to write it again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now, what that means is this x turns into, or sorry, the x squared turns into an x. But what I'm going to get here is plus or minus the square root of 100. And if you put the square root of 100 in on your calculator, you will get 10. So the answer for A, you know, when you were doing this in high school or junior high school, if your teacher said, calculate the square root of 100, your teacher probably said, well, it's just 10. You know, square root of 100, 10. But what you're learning in Math 1700 is it could be actually positive 10 or negative 10. Now, let me show you something. I just want to show you something real quick. I'm going to graph this. So x squared equals 100. So look at now, let me zoom. I don't know if I'll even get, oops, sorry. I didn't mean to zoom out of my page. I want to zoom out on the graph. Okay, so I'm not even, like the graph looks silly when I zoom out. So I'll keep zoomed in. But you can see here, when I graph x squared equals 100, my answers are x equals negative 10 and x equals positive 10. I mentioned this yesterday. Graphing these will give you the answers. The only problem is, you know, most of you don't have graphing calculators, and we're not really going to talk about graphing quadratics, which is a good thing because it takes a lot of time. But if you're wondering where the positive 10 and negative 10 come from, you can see it from graphing the equation. The answers to this are where it crosses the x-axis. So this Desmos thing, this website I've been showing you for a while, is really good, really fun for solving these. Okay. Whoops, sorry guys, hold on. All right, so let's look at C. We could also solve C on that graphing calculator, by the way. But again, you know, when you're doing a test or something, you're not going to have a graphing calculator. So let's look at C. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to move the 72 over. So 8x squared equals negative 72. X squared would be negative 72 over 8. X squared would be 9. And now this one's pretty easy. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So this would become x equals plus or minus the square root of 9. X is plus or minus 3. Again, so guys, what this means is x could be 3 or x could be -3. If I graph this, and I know I just closed that, but let me show you. Just give me 1 second. I gotta close or open up my window again. If I graph this, so I think it was 8x squared equals 72. Oops. You can see your answers there. Where now, by the way, guys, this graph looks weird. Like it looks like it's 2 straight lines. A quadratic will actually look like this if I could zoom out far enough, but I can't. But yeah, there's my answer. X is -3. X is +3. So again, you can always check your answers by graphing this. This program is free. As you can see here, I'm not even signed into it. This is a free program, so I highly recommend trying this guy out. All right, anyways, I'll do one more, then I'll get you guys to practice. And then we'll do one more little section, and that's it for today. What I want to do after we practice these is to try these type of examples where we create what's called a perfect square trinomial, and that will be good for today. Okay, so E, x minus 5 squared equals 18. Okay, so same thing's going to happen. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and this will leave me with x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 18. Now, what is the square root of 18? Well, typically if any of you guys are using your cell phones, it's going to give you a decimal answer. If you did this on your cell phones, it would say 4.24. But if you do this on your Casio calculator, it will say x minus 5 equals plus or minus 3 root 2. And again, your calculator will do that for you. I love these calculators. I wish I had one when I was a student because it would have saved me a lot of work. Anyway, so the square root of 18 is 3 root 2. Or more specifically, plus or minus the square root of 3 root 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 5 over. So x could be 5 plus or minus 3 root 2. And that's it. Halas, we're finished. So what I would love for you guys to do is to try B, D, and F. And of course, I'll be back in 5 minutes. We'll do one more topic, and then we are finished for today. So try B, D, and F. I'll be back in a couple minutes. You can put your answers in the chat, and then I'll do one more little topic, and we'll be done. You'll be finished by 9:05 at the 9:10 at the latest. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Mister, something wrong in S because it's plus or minus 3i.
What do you mean? Are you looking at like the answer key or something?
No. In S, we have minus.
In question
No, and
F?
letter C.
C.
Question numbers. Yeah. The answer.
And C
Yeah, 9
is minus or plus 3i.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. You're correct. Thank you, guys. Yes. Okay, so yeah, that's correct. So this is for people wondering what's happening or what we're talking about is this is negative 72 over 8. So I forgot that this is a negative 9. So the square root of negative 9 is an I. And where did that I come from? Remember, the square root of a negative number or negative 1 is I. So the square root of negative 9 would be I. Thank you for that. That's a really big help. I totally missed that when I was doing my workings. It's early, so thank you for catching that so much. I'll give you guys another couple minutes, of course, to try B, D, and F, and then I'll be back. And thank you again. Very much appreciated. Okay, let's have a look at the answers here. Let me check the chat first. Okay, looking good. All right, let's see what we get. I'm going to have to get rid of my eyes, unfortunately, So I'm trying to get rid of this here. So let me fix that again. So again, guys, just be careful here. -9, that means we're going to have an I. Okay, so let's look at B and D and F, and then I got one more little thing, and that's it for today. So B, very easy. Move the 9 over, x squared equals 9. That means x will be plus or minus the square root of 9. X will be plus or minus 3. So, you know, if you can't type this in the chat, you could just say x equals 3, and or I guess not and, we would say or x equals minus 3. All right, cool. That one pretty straightforward. They're going to get a little harder with D and F. Okay, so first thing I do with F is I divide both sides by -2. I'm trying to get rid of the -2, so I would get x squared is equal to -25. Now, I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and what that means is I'm going to get x is equal to plus or, well, let me do this step by step. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25, a negative. And because this is negative, I'm going to put my I in there. So x will equal plus or minus 5i. If you forgot your I, so for anybody in the chat who didn't put an I in there, you will not get a 0. You might lose half of a mark. But the I has to be there because this is negative. Oops, there we go. Just like D. Or sorry, just like C. Okay, let's look at F. F, I'm going to again take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to get m plus 3 equals the square root of 4. Normally, if you guys did this like a month ago or a year ago, this would have been really easy because you would have just said, oh, m plus 3 equals 2, m equals -1. We're done. But with quadratics, we're learning that there's 2 possible answers. So what this actually becomes is m plus 3 equals plus or minus 2. Again, that's like because this is a quadratic, that's why we're getting 2 answers. It's going to cross the x-axis at 2 points. So, you know, a year ago, you would have just said 2, you're done, easy, no problem. But we're learning, or we learned today with the square root property, that this could be plus or minus 2 mathematically. -2 times -2 is 4. +2 times +2 is 4. So what this means is I'm going to get 2 answers. M could be -3 plus 2, or m could be -3 minus 2. So I would get here -1 and -5. You can see this if you graph this equation. So what is this? M plus 3 squared equals 4. So I'm going to graph this. And I'll show you my screen in a second. So if I graph this, you guys can see my new screen here. I graphed it. I use X. I don't use M because of the way the graph works. I think it wants me to call it X, but you can see my answers. So here's my formula. X plus 3 all squared equals 4. And here are my answers. X is -5. X is -1. So really good way, wink, 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 you know, to figure out these answers to quadratics. Actually, I shouldn't say wink, wink because This would be useful on an assignment. It will not help you on a test, of course. All right. Anyways, back to this last topic, last part of today. So, we just did this one, didn't we? Hold on one second. Example C. Sorry, 1 second. Just want to make sure what. Hold on. Oop, I went too far. Sorry, my bad. I went too far. Right. Okay. So, sorry, I just wanted to see what they meant when they said in example C. And they're talking about the previous example, the last one, in the ones that the book has done for you, example C, they use the square root property to solve this equation. However, we can use another property to solve this equation, and it's called the perfect square trinomial. So the square of the square of a binomial is the factor. So binomial meaning two terms is the factored form of a perfect square trinomial. So we're going to look at these today. So x plus 10x plus 25 is x plus 5 squared. T minus 6 plus 9 is t minus 3 squared. We've actually already seen these in this course. We just never gave them a name. So for a perfect square trinomial with no coefficient, or what we would call a coefficient of 1, the constant term is 1/2 of the middle term. Okay, so what do I mean? Well, look at the examples above. So look at these three examples. If I take this 10 and divide it by 2, the answer is, sorry about that, the answer is 5. So 10 minus 10 divided by 2 is 5. The factored form of this is x plus 5 squared. Look at this one, negative 6. If I divide that by 2, I get a negative 3. Negative 14. If I divide that by 2, oops, not a negative 2, just a 2, I get negative 7. So you can factor these really quickly if you recognize them. It doesn't matter if you don't recognize them, though, because you can still factor these like normal. So look at this down here, what I'm circling. You could still factor this normally. We need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 25 and add to give me 10. Well, that would be 5 and 5. So my answer would be x plus 5 and x plus 5. So you don't need to memorize this, don't worry. It's just a shortcut, and I know some of you guys absolutely love shortcuts, but you can still factor these normally. Okay. So how do you recognize a perfect square trinomial? Well, the way that it works is you take half of the middle term and square it, and it should equal the last term. So this is a way to recognize what we would call perfect square trinomials. So what do I mean? Take the middle term, divide it by 2, and square it. And if it's the same as the last term, you have yourself what's called a perfect square trinomial. So let's look at this. Determine the value of n that makes the polynomial a perfect square trinomial. Then factor it. So a, x squared minus 26x plus n. So I need to get or figure out n. Well, the way that it works is, and you can see it here, but I'll just write it down. My middle term is negative 26. I'm going to divide that by 2, so I get negative 13, and then I'm going to square it, and that gives me 169. So the 169 goes there. The factored form is just going to be x minus 13 squared. the middle term divided by 2. Pretty straightforward. It can get a little harder for sure, like if you look at question C, but still. Okay, let's look at B. I need to find n. Well, n is going to be 11 divided by 2 squared. So 121 over 4. You can see that there. And the factored form will be x plus 11 over 2 squared. Pretty easy, nothing too crazy. Let me show you one more, and then I'll get you guys to try a couple, and then halas, that's it for today. Okay, so n. Now, there's a problem here. I am going to go, or I'm trying to take 4 over 7 and then divide that by 2. You can do that on your graphing calculator, but really what I'm doing is I'm multiplying it by 1/2, which will make my life a lot easier. So this becomes -4 over 14. Okay, and you can try that. So I guess I could reduce this as well. Sorry. So I could reduce this now. So I could reduce this to -2 over 7. Your calculator will do this, by the way. I'm just trying to do it in my head. Now, I'm not done, because to find n, I need to take the -2 over 7 and square it. So I'll get 4 over 49. That's where that comes from. But the reason I did all this work up here is to show you where -2 over 7 comes from. And guys, this -2 over 7, honestly, if you put this in on your calculator, you could say -4 over 7 divided by 2. You will get -2 over 7. So you can try that on your calculators. All right. So I would love for you guys to try 3 of these, and then we're done. So why don't you try A, B, and C, and then we're finished. All right, I'll be back I'll only give you about 3 minutes for this. This is really quick, and that's it. So we'll be done by like 9:11, we'll say. So 3 minutes, we'll check your answers, and that's it. Oh, and by the way, this says find n and factor. So don't forget to factor these. And I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, let's look at your answers. Not much in the chat here, but I'm sure you guys are doing okay. This is definitely a little easier than the previous section. Tomorrow, we won't get to this today. I mean, I could, but I won't. But tomorrow, then we're going to solve this using this method, which is actually pretty simple. Sorry, not simple, but once you've applied this method, half of the work is done. Okay, so n here. N is going to be 20 over 2 squared. So that would be, 10 squared, so 100. And my factored form would then be x plus 10 squared. Now, where did the 10 come from? 10 is just 20 over 2. That's where the 10 comes from. It's the middle term, the term with the x divided by 2. Okay, what about b? Well, n in this case is going to be negative 16 over 2 squared, which is a negative 8 squared, which is 64. And this would be y minus 8 squared. And for A is a little bit different because we're going to have a fraction. So n would be negative 5 over 2 squared. So this would be 25 over 2. And my factored form would be a minus 5 over 2 squared like this. If it's a number like 5 where you can't divide it by 2 evenly, you use the fractional form. You could use a decimal here. You could say, 2.5, but I wouldn't use a decimal. I would just say 5 over 2. Okay, guys, let me check the chat. Thank you, Fatima, for the answers for A and B. They look great. That's it for me today. So guys, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, I'll see you tomorrow morning.